Python for loop. So a for loop is one of the two main types of loops within Python. You have your for loops and you have your while loops. With for loops, what you're going to do is you're going to iterate through an object. And that means you're going to iterate through each piece of something and you're going to do something with it. And I think it's best explained if we look at a few examples. First thing I want to do here is I want to just jump right into for loops and I'll show you the nomenclature. So what you're going to say is for I. Now, I could be any variable you want, and you're going to say in. Now, what you're going to do here is you're saying for I, which is just any variable placeholder, in, then you need to pass a iterable. Now, an iterable is going to be anything that you can iterate through. So in this case, for example, I'm saying for I, and remember, I can be any variable, in a list of 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so what's going to happen here is Python is going to go to the 1 and it's going to do something with it. Then it's going to go to the 2, the 3, and the 4. And in this case, I'm telling it to print I. Now that means that I is going to equal 1, and then I is going to equal 2, and then I3, I4. Let's run this. And as you can see here, we get 1, 2, and 3, and 4 because it iterates through the list, does a for loop through them, and prints through it. Now, if say we wanted to multiply this by 2 or something, you could do that same exact thing and get them multiplied there. The next thing that we're going to look at is, well, you can also iterate through strings. This is a little less common, but strings are also iterables. And you can say for I and Bob, print I, and you get Bob. And just to show that you can have this be anything, I'm just doing a random string right here, or random variable, and you get the same exact thing. Okay? So for I and Bob, and there you go. You can also iterate through a dictionary. And when you iterate through a dictionary, you're going to iterate through each key value pair, and you're actually going to be iterating through the keys. So in this case, if I just did for I in dict and then print I, well, you're just going to print the keys. And if you want to print the values too, then you actually need to call the values by calling the key within the dictionary, and then you get your values right there. However, next thing you want to be mindful of is you can't iterate through all data types. So integers, for example, you can't iterate through. If I tried doing for I in 3, print I, it's going to give me a error that says int object is not iterable, which means that you can't iterate through an int because it's just a single value. Okay. Now, if you really wanted to iterate through this, then you could enclose your int within a list, and you're going to get, then now this becomes an iterable, but an int on its own is not iterable. Okay. And so the next thing that you want to be mindful of is when you're mutating a list that you're actually working on. So what I mean by that is, say I have a list here, and this list is just the numbers 1 through 7, and I'm saying for num in my list, and then I want to print the number. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pop the list, and pop means take the last item off. So it's going to go through the list, it's going to print 1, take 7 off. It's going to print 2, take 6 off, print 3, take 5 off, and then print 4. Go ahead and run this, and you can see here that the list stops after 4 because there's no more items on it anymore because we popped them. Okay. Another small little trick that I like with for loops is you can actually do enumerate on your for loops. And so this means that you're actually going to outline the index or the position of the thing that you're currently on. And so, for example, I have Sally, Frank, Ted, and Katie, and I'm going to call enumerate. But you'll notice here that I'm using 2 variables instead of just 1. I'm using I, which I commonly use to show the index position, and then I'm using num, which is the actual variable. And so I'm going to print, well, first of all, let's just print I and see what we get. And if I print I, I'm just getting 0, 1, 2, and 3 for the positions 0, 1, 2, and 3. And remember, Python starts on position 0, which is why you start here. It's kind of backwards. You'd think they'd start on 1, but that's not the case. If I were to just print num, which doesn't really make sense in this case because I'm printing out some names. So let me print name here instead. Then you just get the names. But if you wanted both, then you can say, well, print I and name, and then you'll get both of them. Now, there's 2 kind of big, we'll call it statements you can run within for loops. And this is the continue statement, and this is the break statement. So what continue is going to do is it is going to continue on to the next iteration of your code without running the remainder of your code. So let's do this one more time. We'll do a for loop, and I'm saying for I in range 6. And so if I were to print just I in here, you'll see I get the numbers 0 through 5. However, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if I equals 3, I want to continue. And what this is going to do is when I equals 3, which we know it equals 3 because it prints it out right here, then I'm going to continue. And that's actually going to stop, can pass over the rest of the code. So this print statement won't run. And I'll run this. And then all of a sudden you see that 3 gets skipped because when I equals 3, I continue, and then it passes on right to the next item, and that is going to be 4. The last thing that we'll look at is the break statement. So what break is going to do is, let me use this same for loop that we had beforehand, and then I'm going to print I. And then so what break is going to do is if I did when if I equals 3, break. And so in this case, break will actually stop your for loop altogether. It won't just simply pass on to the next item. So it's going to get to 3 and it's going to break. So it's not even going to print 3, 4, or 5 because it's just going to stop the for loop altogether. Run this, and as you can see here, I get 0, 1, and 2 because the for loop stopped. So that is Python for loops, a fundamental building block within Python and data analysis.